you guys didn't see the background settings. That didn't exist. Hello, Clever. Welcome in. Immersion broken. I'm sorry, son. Gotta get back to class, though, so just lurking. No worries, Clever. Enjoy. Well, you should probably be listening to your teacher in class, not listening to me. But I do appreciate you lurking. But welcome in, everyone. I hope you're all well. Please take a spot by the fire, and we'll get started shortly with our reading today. I hope we've all been quite well and have had a decent start to the week and up to the middle. We're almost there, everyone. We're almost at the weekend. I went on a long walk today. Actually, I walked home at halfway through work. I decided to just walk home. It was a nice long walk, so very enjoyable. But I hope you're doing well, Clever. I know you're currently studying, and I hope you're doing well, son. I've been really enjoying, actually, son, your vase art, or not vase, sorry, your well, yeah, your pottery art. Have Yeah, we're able to work from home as well, and at lunchtime I just kind of went like, I'll just head home for today. I didn't have any reason to stick around beyond that. Welcome in, copyright as well. Thank you for joining us. I am going to be today continuing our reading of Phillip of Macedon. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. I forgot to do a thing. I forgot to do the thing where I post in various areas to let people know that I am live. That's an important thing to do. Spam yourself everywhere. You have to do it everywhere. Hi D, welcome in as well. Whoa, there's a lot of people at the start of the stream today. There's a lot of you. Some of you may have seen it actually, but I recently, hope you're doing well, by the way, D. But I did a big long response to Parsecs, who's another streamer. He's kind of a science streamer. He kind of does stuff like I do in terms of reading, but his is more like kind of looking at research papers and talking about things that he's like working on, because he's an actual like scientist. He's an actual scientist. Rip your cat. I remember we had a long conversation about your cat. I hope it's not a new cat. That would be very unfortunate timing. I just realized, D, you call me Ruru. Very cute. I've been exploring the art style lately. It's very nice. I do really enjoy it. I think you really suited, obviously, because you're kind of Roman, so your style kind of fits into it. But I know you were talking about possibly doing other VTubers in pottery style. I think that would be really cool. You could even mess around a little bit with it and do like shattered pottery fragments. So like there's only so much of the person available. So maybe like if there's anyone who doesn't have legs, you only have like the shards of that part. I don't know. You could do something silly like that, or maybe you only have like half or three quarters of the face or something. You could just play around with that or something. Or maybe you have everything but it's shattered, so there's like spaces and stuff in between. I don't know. I'm just making up stuff, making the pot look old adds to the authentic look, I think. Oh yeah, absolutely. You gotta put like a filter over it. You gotta put that filter like if that pottery was from Mexico, you'd have to put a yellow filter over it for for authenticity. The yellow filter of Hollywood for Mexico. The moment you cross that border, like everything just kind of comes a slight tinge of yellow. It's like when you do it's like when you go back in time to like the medieval times, everything becomes grey and drab and colorless. Feel bad. Oh no, copyright. I hope you feel better soon. I was kind of sick myself. I still am a little bit. I'm probably gonna you'll probably hear me coughing at times. To be quite honest, it is very very annoying the past couple of days. I even had to take a break from my singing lessons, and that was quite disappointing. Everything becomes black and white, ragtime, silent movie when we travel back to 1920s. That would be amazing. I'd love that. Imagine we could do that just on a whim, and you could just go traveling for days now, and it's not getting better. It, excuse me. It's been like that for me as well, but like what I'm finding is that like I feel really bad in the morning, and then I feel fine, or mostly fine in the morning, in the afternoon, and the rest of the day. But I do hope you feel better soon. Copyright. It's never fun when you're sick, and sometimes it does just take a couple of days. Like illnesses and flus and whatever can last quite long. So sometimes you just have to tough it out, unfortunately. But oh yeah, I did a big long response on Twitter to Parsecs, a question he asked ages ago, and I saw it a good while ago, but I'd been meaning to respond, but I knew it was going to be very long. It ended up being like, I think it was like 4,000 plus characters. So I had to take screenshots. I had to take 4 screenshots of my answer, and then still add on like one tweet extra at the end. It was a very long response. He posed the question of if one was to get consent, and like obviously consent, we immediately think of you know bodily consent or whatever, or sexual consent. But this was more general. I felt this was kind of more general consent. Consent for someone to use your car, for instance, or consent to have a photo taken of them. And he asked, if you take if you get a mind, and it consents to something, and you take a copy of that instance of that mind consenting to something, would that consent be transferable in some fashion? Now, I didn't fully understand what he may have meant by transferable. But then he said, then he also posed a question of how does that relate then to consent across time? And I pretty much had a small discussion, tying a lot into what we read about in the Philosophy of Mind book quite a while back. Basically arguing that I kind of had trouble accepting the idea of copying a mind in the first place. And even then I had issues with the logical relations between consent and the rest of the thoughts and various other things. And I'll probably cease there because it was very long, and there was a lot of different stuff being brought in. So if you'd like to go read that, you can probably go onto my Twitter. I need to set up a thing on my chat that goes, follow me on Twitter, join my Discord, and all that. But you can find that if you go to Twitter and go replies, you'll probably see the big long red text in the photos. But I definitely enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to seeing Parsec's response, because I'm concerned after all that time I spent on it, Parsecs is gonna write like a 2-word reply or like a 2-sentence reply and just absolutely BTFO me, destroy me, send me packing, make me cry because of how wrong I was. And this is a guy who does like science. He's probably written like articles in journals. He replies, "K, no, that would be even worse." He said he'd think about it and write up his response later. And if it's K, then I'm gonna feel sad. D, no, don't do that to me. Just completely brushes me off. That would be kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie. That would be pretty good. But no, I'm sure he's probably going to give me some interesting ideas. It would be the most devastating thing. And welcome in as well, Laughs a Lot. Thank you for joining us. Pleasure to have you here. I was just talking about a big long response I gave to another VTuber friend. I won't rehash it, but yeah, he'll. Oh, you were probably lurking, because I think that crying emote was meant to be me reacting to him just going K. But he's like, as I said, he's like a scientist. Straight up. So I could imagine him having a lot of interesting kind of points to make on some of the things that I said. preparing for lessons. Forgot to say hi again. No worries, and enjoy. I just assume when people like comment that that's when they first enter the stream, but I need to remember that some people just like to enjoy and listen. Did you say what you're going to read today? Yeah, we're going to be continuing on where we left off. The Philip II of Macedonia, Greater than Alexander by Richard A. Gabriel. Oh no, I just ate an entire pizza and I'm still hungry. I knew this would happen. Pizzas aren't filling it all. Oh no, son. Son, what about your calorie intake? An entire pizza. Wait, was this one of those small, like couple of inches pizzas? I mean that's not going to be very filling, but if I'm just imagining son eating of like a I don't know, like a 16-inch pizza all to himself. It was 700 calories. Oh, what do I do? No, what do I don't know how to pronounce that. I suddenly can't pronounce that. Ugh. Oh yeah, that history lesson. That's what we're going to be continuing on today. For a tenner last summer. Oh my god, last lot. That's pretty sweet. I haven't had a proper pizza in quite a while. I tend, if I'm getting takeout, I tend to get katsu curry from this really, really, really good place. It's better than any katsu curry I've ever tried. For some reason, I imagine it's probably their own version, and they probably throw a bunch of extra spices or stuff into it, and it's just so good, so good. I was very disappointed when I went to other places, and I would check out like their local, either Asian fusion restaurant or Japanese restaurant, and I try their katsu, and it's just like, it's okay. It's fine. It's edible, but like, you know, the other one is so. And the amount of food they give in that one is it's like it's enough for 2 dinners, to be honest, or a dinner and like your breakfast the following morning. Oh yeah, I also wanted to mention, I'm not sure, I'm going to be waiting until my voice kind of recovers until I do that, I'm going to go take your pills and take a piss. That seems like a good, I like the P alliteration. No worries, see you in a moment. I'm going to be, what was I going to do? Oh yeah, I'm going to be waiting until my, throat is kind of fully better before I do my gym crochet kind of themed karaoke. But I am looking forward to it. There's a couple of songs in particular that I'm really looking forward to doing because I feel like I've gotten pretty decent at singing them, even on key. So, and then there's a few others that are just fun to sing. Like there's a few where I feel like you almost have to do like an accent, pissing and pilling exactly, son. You almost have to do an accent because he has like whatever way he's singing, he has like a drawl. So, well, yeah, I'm looking for. I feel like maybe 2 weeks from now, like the weekend after next, or the weekend after that. 3 weekends away, I guess. I might do the karaoke then on some weekend. Welcome back, copyright. And I think I'm going to be playing. I'm going to be reading, and I'm probably going to play more of Volcano Princess. I really did enjoy that, so maybe I'll play that tomorrow or something, or Friday and Saturday. I'm going to be busy Sunday, unfortunately, so likely I'm not going to have a stream that day. But we'll see what happens. I need to cut my nails. They're getting a little bit long. It's. I'm gonna be honest. The fact that I can say that is very, very, like, I'm really happy about that because I used to bite them fairly badly, but now they're quite nice to look at. They're just long at this point, and they need to be shaped up a little bit. I need to start using my hand cream again as well. I'm getting on the sides. They're just getting a little dry. I think just all this cold weather. Maybe someday I'll do a hand cam stream, and I'll point out to the ones that I think are like particularly nicely shaped. For example, the nail on my like right ring finger, I feel like is probably the best looking one. Since I've started growing them out, I've become kind of. I want, and now we're talking about nails. Yes, yes. Where one would expect. Listen, I genuinely like. I'm a relatively masculine guy, I would say. You know, there's a lot of other VTubers that if you want the opposite of that, you can go get that. But I will talk about my nails because it's something that I'm genuinely proud that I managed to kick off. Now I just need to figure out when exactly how many days to leave my nails grow before cutting them. Am I late to the stream? No. And is it Gail? Hang on, sorry. Let me look at your name. Angale 87. No, not at all. You're not late to the stream. I've mostly just been talking. I'm probably going to be reading soon enough. I've kind of just been, or is it? I don't think. Yeah, it's not Angel. It's Angale. Angale. But welcome in. Thank you very much for the first time chat. It's very nice to have you. I hope you enjoy the reading soon enough. I'm thankful. Thank you. That's good to hear. Thank you very much for joining us. Relatively, yes. Of course. I mean, can I really say I'm super masculine with like if I'm talking about my nails and like cutting them and filing them or whatever. I think if I'm ever going to do a hand can stream, I'm probably going to get like a manicure beforehand. I'll go in and I'll get like the businessman manicure, whatever that is. I'll tell them what I want. That'll be an interesting experience. Deeply, deeply fuck. It's not. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that like you don't like talk about it. I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, guys, I file my nails. But it is something actually that again I am quite happy. It can be busy. Unfortunately, I am going to be copyright. I am going to be quite busy. But I think with that I'm going to get into the reading today, and I think you can maybe tell that I'm already dropping down my voice just a little bit. To continue on our reading with Philip II of Macedonia, Greater than Alexander, by Richard A. Gabriel. Now, when we last left off, we've been reading about the strategic environment that Philip of Macedon found himself in. We looked at kind of the people of Macedonia, where they came from, how they came to be developed, how certain aspects of their culture came about, the divide between the mountainous north and the plains of the south. And then we also looked at some of the external threats that Philip was facing, particularly the Illyrians, the what was it, the Mamodians of Epirus. I forget exactly which family it was that ruled Epirus at the time. It was the one that actually was from Molossians, I think that's what it was, or the Molossians. Then you had the various tribes from Thrace, the Triballians, and of course you had the southern Greek states, Sparta, Athens, Thebes, always influencing and causing issues for Philip, for Macedon, using them as a puppet essentially. Persia at a time, but they'd been kicked out long ago. And then you also had I forget the exact name of the league, but it was ruled by Olynthus. It was essentially a sort of league made up of the people who lived on the tree fingers, right next to him. So they were quite hemmed in, and they were quite in a lot of trouble. So we'll pull up a little map here. You've returned with food. Lovely, Angale. Well, I hope you enjoy the reading, because we're about to get into it. So I have my little pointer, and I have, oh, that's me. I just darted to the side, don't worry. And so really, even though this map shows Macedonia as sort of like this area, at the time of Philip's, really he was sort of hemmed in a much smaller area, dealing with Athens and their areas of Potidaea, or Amphiphopolis, Epirus with the Molossians, the Illyrians, the northern tribes, and as well even some of the... But wait, before we start reading... and some of the northern cantons, as well as in the Illyrians also control quite a portion of Macedonia, after a war with Macedonia. So Philip finds himself in a pretty difficult position. And we're going to be looking then at the Macedonian state and kind of how Philip, I guess, develops this from the strategic standpoint. But first, he wants a hydrate redeem. There's my bottle of water. 2 moments. I have my big bottle of water back. It's metal. It's very nice. But thank you very much, copyright. Oh, that's cold water. That's the one nice thing about when it's cold is your water will always stay cold. But that's probably good to have right before reading. Yours is plastic. I would definitely recommend moving to a metal one. Mine is quite large, so it could be really heavy with all the water in it. But like, what kind of bottle do I have? I have, what's it called? Buzio, Buzio. It has a symbol of a lion. It's a big, kind of insulated metal one. It's quite handy. So the Macedonian state. The king and the assembly of Macedones were the only official organs of the Macedonian state government. The Macedonian monarchy's roots reached back to Homeric times. The original kings from Argos brought with them a Homeric view of kingship and imposed it upon the native peoples. Over time, however, this concept was modified with elements incorporated from Macedonia's own pastoral past. When the original society of pastoral companies was ruled by the chief shepherd, or Shelniku, whose position seemed to have largely confined to members of the same family and confirmed occasionally by the election of the warriors around him. The powers that the Macedonian kings derived from both the Homeric and pastoral traditions were extensive, although not absolute. The Homeric idea that the king was ascended from the gods and embodied their favor was central to the Macedonian king's legitimacy. This embodiment was seen to reside in the physical person of the king, who passed it on to his son. Thus, Macedonian kings were always chosen from within the same bloodline, if not from the same immediate family. By Philip's time, the Temenid dynasty had ruled the country for more than 3 centuries, and Philip himself was a direct heir. In some instances, the infant son of the previous king was anointed, while a regent ruled until the child was old enough to assume his rightful position. For a Macedonian king to be legitimate, however, the assembly of Macedones met and had to approve his appointment by formal election, a practice rooted in the pastoral past when the warriors around the chief shepherd were required to consent to a new chief. The Macedonian king's central obligation, as that of the ancient Shelniku, was to attend to his people's religious and material welfare. As in the old pastoral system when the goods of the company were held in common, the Macedonian king claimed all the material goods of the country as his own. In practice, he disposed of all lands and all products of the land, mines and stands of timber for shipbuilding that were not already taken with the obligation to use them for the good of his people. Any spear-won land outside the country proper also fell to his ownership, and might be used as he saw fit. This arrangement made Philip the wealthiest king in all of Greece, and he had few limits on how to use his wealth. Certainly none as bothersome as those placed upon the rulers of the Greek states. The kings awarded fiefs to important companions and allies and gave grants of land to captured populations that were resettled in Macedonia. In other cases, he moved Macedonians to conquered lands, turning once foreign lands and cities into Macedonian territories. Philip used the income from taxes, custom duties, and the sale of horses, and the output of the gold and silver mines to pay his army well, so much so that the military service became a full-time profession at which a man could earn a proper living. The remuneration transformed the former militia force into a professional army. Philip paid for his infantry's equipment, but required the cavalry to purchase horses, often from his own stud farms. Philip's great wealth enabled him to maintain large numbers of men and animals under arms year-round, something no other Greek state could afford to do. For all his power, however, Philip was by no means an absolute monarch, and his authority was limited by the Macedones who met in the assembly to discuss important matters and advise the king. The assembly of Macedones was the embodiment of the Macedonian people and comprised serving soldiers and recent veterans of the king's army, or what Aristotle called the citizens in arms. The assembly's military composition reveals its origin in the group of professional warriors that surrounded the Shalniku and protected the people during pastoral times. The king and his warriors in the assembly had created the Macedonian state, and as the only formal organs of state government, they remain responsible for protecting it. The egalitarian atmosphere that usually attends a gathering of warriors was evident in the assembly's meetings. Aristotle noted the assembly met under arms, that is, its members were in full military kit and had their weapons handy. Each Macedon was entitled to speak, and the Macedonians prided themselves on what Curtius called their, quote, equal rights of speech. If a speaker addressed the king, he removed his helmet as a sign of respect and spoke freely, without fear. The king had only his single vote in a debate, the same as any other Macedon. While all spoke Greek, it was Philip's habit to use the Macedonian dialect during these meetings, yet another sign of military camaraderie. Another sign of military camaraderie. There we go, camaraderie, and informality. The assembly's members were soldiers, comrades in arms, equals who bore the same risks and hardships in defending and protecting their people. One's standing therein was assigned not by birth or wealth, but by one's demonstrated courage on the battlefield. It was with his comrades' help and advice that Philip governed Macedon. I'm not even tired, but this makes me eepy. The assembly did not sit permanently or even regularly, as in other Greek states, but it was convened by the king or by his representative if the king was on campaign. Whenever important issues had to be discussed and decided. Or by his representative if the king was on campaign whenever important issues had to be discussed and decided. It was one sentence. These concerns included relations with other states, treaties, requests made by foreign governments, religious matters, payments of debts, and reports regarding finances. As already mentioned, the assembly was responsible for electing a new king and, if necessary, choosing a guardian for him. The assembly also heard trials in cases of treason and could sentence a person to death. Sometimes the sentence was carried out on the spot, with the assembly's members throwing their javelins and spears. Imagine that. Imagine, like, that's how we did death sentences these days. The judge in America is sitting on his big chair. He hears from the stand that the jury has elected to find the criminal guilty and to be sentenced to death. And then he just tells the jury to go at it, and they just start, like, shooting at him. Just a brawl. Not even a brawl, they just start throwing stones or something. Because guns, like 12 people shooting guns in a small room would not be at one target. Would be a terrible idea. I'ma take a nap, so just continue where you are, and don't forget to breathe. I will do my best not to forget to breathe. If I suddenly faint, you guys will know I have failed. Governing the Macedonian state and fighting its wars required more than an assembly of warriors that met only when important issues arose, however. To govern effectively, the king needed advice and expertise on a more regular basis. For this guidance, he turned to his companions. The companions were a group of the king's most trusted advisors, and he relied on their frank counsel and skills. The institution had its earliest roots in Homeric times when Achilles was said to have had his most trusted companions around him. It was also rooted in the Macedonian pastoral past when a small group of advisors, the Pere, were selected among the warriors and advised the Shalniku in carrying out the affairs of the group. Under Philip were three types of companions: the heteroi, the companions, the philoi, the friends, and the hegemones, the military commanders. Particularly the unit commanders of the field army. The companions not only comprised military men, but also those who Philip thought important to have around him. Critobulus, the physician who treated Philip's eye at Metheny, Eumenes of Cardia, the chief of Philip's intelligence service, Polyados, the Thessalian engineer who detected Philip's military engineering department, who directed Philip's military engineering department, and was probably the inventor of the torsion catapult. When Philip incorporated the upper cantons into Macedonia proper, and what he's talking about is kind of this region here. We kind of talk. Oh, hang on, I keep moving the wrong thing. Point. There we go. Kind of upper cantons. Imagine the accused just sweating because they see the jury filing with a bunch of spears. Yeah. he better know how to run fast. Run as fast as he can, and suddenly he's met with a wall of spears. That would be, oh god. You'd want to have the best lawyer then. Like, it's already rough enough, but now you're facing getting stabbed. Oh yeah. When Philip incorporated the upper cantons into Macedonia proper, he disbanded their local aristocracies, but made their most important nobles companions. Paramenio, a chief of the Pelagonese, was one of these. Other companions included a number of renowned mercenary officers who joined Philip, such as Demaratus of Corinth, and Erigaius and Lamedon, two brothers from Mytilene. I just imagined that and cackled. Angale would want to be one of those people walking in with the spears. They'd be hoping for a. They wouldn't even listen to the case. It sounds. They'd just be. I want a death sentence. Angale, he stole a loaf of bread. Death sentence. I want to stab him. Where were we? Oh, yes. Theopompus tells us that there were not more than 800 companions, and that number has been generally accepted as correct. When at war, the companions provided the army's elite cavalry, but they could only have done so in the early years of Philip's reign, when his cavalry force was about the same size as the companions' group. Later, as his cavalry grew in numbers, it was unlikely that, in the strict sense, all his cavalrymen were companions, for they could not all be advisors to the king. Having hundreds of advisors is clearly not practical. Alexander's companions numbered no more than 150. This difference suggests that a distinction arose between those companions who were the king's closest advisors and the cavalrymen who were awarded the honorific of companion cavalry, but who did not serve as actual advisors to the kings. Kill first, ask questions later. Exactly, son, exactly. Let me check the notes here, because I think we have a few potential notes, but I have to go all the way to the back of the book, because this is very stupidly put together. They could have just put actual notes at the bottom. Oh yes, we do have one actually here about the independent authority of the assembly was evident when Philip was campaigning in Thrace, and left Alexander behind and in charge of the country. When a revolt broke out among the Maedi, Alexander secured the assembly's permission to put together a military expedition, lead it into the area, and put down the revolt. Successful, he established a new city in the area and named it after himself. Alexander is... it's so funny. Anytime he wins or does anything, it's like, I want to make a city. He has like hundreds of things. Although the companions were an important part of the government, they had no constitutional or formal status. Without any restrictions, the king chose whom he thought could best serve him in times of war and in administering the state. The position did not pass from father to son, and the king's favour, and with it, a man's status as a companion, could be withdrawn at any time. When Philip provided his most important companions with estates, there had never been a feudal landed nobility in Macedonia, even in pastoral times. The companions did not constitute a landed feudal class, such as that found in medieval Europe. They had no institutional, property, or independent power base from which to resist the king, and they did not command any element of the polity. such as militia groups or independent cavalry units raised by their own efforts. They were a military nobility, and on the battlefield, the companions were Philip's best combat commanders, his elite cavalry, and his bodyguards, whom he relied on for his life. I have to say, it's quite an interesting thing that he would make. So it mentioned that he would get rid of the local aristocracy, and that's all often something you see in kind of any nation building action by an individual. You see this with any of the Macedonia in this instance, and as well as Mongolia with Genghis Khan. Often what they'll do now, Genghis Khan was a little bit more aggressive, but I think even Philip probably had this underlying aggression, or not aggression, but threat of violence as well. But often, because there were so many different tribes and different groups, what Genghis Khan would do is he would split up those tribes, those other groups. Of violence is the answer. In this case, it was. Excuse me. And Genghis Khan would often he would kill the most senior of the tribes, and then he would split them up and send them off into different corners of Mongolia. And he would do this to various groups. Now there were other groups, of course, that survived such purges and were incorporated into other groups and stuff. But he basically took a practice of divide and conquer, in the sense of dividing the small tribal groups that were part of the wider Mongolian ethnicity into such a way that eventually those tribal relations diffused into the greater Mongol identity. And in that way he builds a state. Now here we see Philip doing something I think is quite similar. He gets rid of the local aristocracies. I don't know if he imposes others from abroad, or maybe he has people come from the plains and go into the cantons, and come from the cantons and go into the plains, and mix and matches that way to get kind of a broader Macedonian identity appearing. Let me just take another drink of water. In most important respects, Macedonia was a military state. Its army was larger than any in Greece, and its complexity approached that of a modern military force. The country's far-flung and economically diverse conditions required a competent administration to function effectively, and to provide the army with the necessary resources to carry out Philip's campaigns. The army also demanded capable combat leaders and generals to fight the battles and win the wars. It was a mark of Philip's genius that he recognized the need to train a cadre of qualified leaders to serve the army and the state. Philip turned a traditional Macedonian institution, the Royal Page School, to identify, train, and develop new leaders. The Royal Page School had existed since perhaps from as early as the 5th century BC, and certainly from the time of Archelaus, 413 to 399 BC. In earlier times, it had primarily educated the royal princes and perhaps the sons of allied tribal chiefs and Macedonian nobles. The school still served these purposes under Philip, but was expanded to become the main educational and military training school for the sons of Philip's companions and other important friends and foreign allied nobles. The school was located in Pella. Pella is right center here, right here, and served as the Macedonian West Point. It was a boarding school and required completion of a 4-year-long curriculum of study and training for graduation. The cadets entered at the age of 14, moved through the curriculum and class years just as in modern military schools, and finally graduated at age 18. Each class comprised about 50 students, and so that some 200 young men were enrolled at any one time. The usual Greek curriculum was taught, and we might suspect some emphasis was placed on reading the many treatises of Greek military history that had appeared since the end of the Peloponnesian Wars. The royal princes, including Alexander, all attended the school. Part of their education was also learning to associate with the sons of the other companions who, when their time came, would be their own companions while in the service of the country. Alexander later took several of his boyhood friends with him, with whom he had studied under Aristotle, as companions, the most notable of whom was Ptolemy, who would eventually go on to form the Ptolemy kingdom, essentially, the Ptolemaic kingdom. Besides the former liberal Greek education, the students were put through rigorous military training. Rough living, fasting, endurance training, hunting wild animals with spears, riding, and other experiences central to the Macedonian military training were all required of all cadets, including the royal princes. Senior cadets were permitted access to the king. They served as guards when he slept, were allowed to sit at his table, and looked after his horses. Discipline was strict, and breaches were punished by caning, which the king himself often administered. It was said that Philip once beat a student to death for failing to carry out a military order. Oh my god. The older cadets accompanied the king on campaign, where some of them fell in battle protecting their sovereign. If we are to believe Justin, some of Philip's many sons had been killed in battle this way. The Royal Page School was a training ground for Macedonia's future combat officers and administrators, and Aristotle was correct when he called it a, quote, school for generals. Few of Philip's accomplishments are understandable. However, apart from his tremendous accomplishments in the administration of his kingdom, Philip inherited a weak and geographically divided country with no central coherence or administration worthy of the name. By Greek standards of the day, its society was primitive, its standard of living low, its people poor, and the potential of its substantial economic resources either under-realized or exploited by others. And just to mention, an example of that exploitation was, for example, Amphipolis here, founded by Athens, where at the end of the Strymon River there were many mines, silver, and also the forests of Macedonia, which were quite central for shipbuilding for the Athenian navies. Excuse me. From an administrative perspective, no central authority was sufficiently powerful to effectively govern the state, exploit its resources, and protect its territorial integrity. These circumstances changed under Philip, who transformed Macedonia into a large, wealthy, and well-managed state that remained a major economic and political force in Greece and the eastern Mediterranean until the Romans dismantled it after the Battle of Pydna in 168 BC. Sun just went like, oh, pog-based Rome. Philip began reorganizing the Macedonian state almost immediately, after he had defeated the Illyrians in 358 BC, and thereby reduced the most immediate threat of invasion. The Illyrians are to the west of the point there. You can see Illyria. Philip Roma Eterna. Philip restructured the frontier defences by occupying the cantons of Upper Macedonia, abolishing their monarchies and amalgamating their territories into the Macedonian state. He constructed fortifications to guard the important mountain passes, and in some places he forced the tribal peoples out of the mountains and resettled them in defensible settlements on the high mountain plains. Populations of Macedonians were transplanted and settled among them to teach agriculture and retrain their militias for self-defense along Macedonian military lines. So again, we see this example of tearing people away from their usual supposed tribal kind of area, mixing them among the more already kind of loyal people and developing this Macedonian nation. In the northwestern areas facing the Illyrians, Philip established 3 new cities and strategic places to interrupt the invasion routes through the mountain passes. In the north, near Monastir, Philip established a new city that guarded the Paeonians' invasion routes and the approaches to the iron gates of the Axius River. Philip established this new city by removing the area's entire population and replacing it with Macedonians. Don't ask how he removed them. In the northeast, he created a new city called Philippopolis, modern Plovdiv, to control the routes of advance from Thrace to the Axius River. According to Justin, Philip located cities such as these on the very frontiers to face his enemies. Philip continued the same practices throughout his reign, founding, quote, strong cities as key points that made it impossible for them to commit any further outrages. So let's see if we can spot any of them. I don't know if this might not be labeled for... Oh no, here is Philippopolis. So yeah, you can see obviously the establishment of this city here was after he had managed to consolidate much more power. But you can see that it's really on the frontier. It's very close to the Balkan tribes in Thrace. It's deep into territory, looking to really control this region. You also see Philippi, another city here. You can see where Alexander got the whole, naming thing, or building cities and naming it after himself. Philip took a tribal state and transformed it into a true territorial state for the first time in European history. To accomplish this feat, Philip imposed a policy of moving both Macedonian captured populations to locations that provided the best defense and economic benefit for the state. This strategy met some resistance and perhaps even occasional violence, but Philip was involved in what we would call today nation building, and both disruption and resistance were to be expected. Excuse me. Justin explains how Philip went about transporting populations. In returning to, quote, it's just a long quote. In returning to his kingdom, he transferred at his own pleasure populations and cities in accordance with his own ideas of what places should be occupied or abandoned, even as shepherds moved their flocks now to winter pastures and now to summer pastures. He placed some populations on the very frontiers to face his enemies, others he planted at the furthest limits of his kingdom. Certain populations that had been captured in war he divided and sent to supplement the inhabitants of his cities. And it was by these means that he created a single kingdom and a single people out of many tribes and races. Let me just turn the page, excuse me. 62. In some cases, the process involved transferring Macedonian populations to other cities to create cities of Macedons. Sometimes half the population of a Macedonian city would be sent elsewhere to leaven up a new site's population. Lower Macedonians were also sent to Upper Macedonia to create new cities and teach the former pastoralists law, order, and military training. Some, as Justin tells us, quote, whom he had taken as prisoners of war, he distributed among cities to fill up the number of inhabitants. We hear in one case of 10,000 Sarnusi, an Illyrian tribe, taken from their home and led off to Macedonia. In Philip's Scythian campaign, 20,000 women and children captured in the war were marched off and resettled in Macedonian towns and cities. Once Philip had all the thieves, informers, and false witnesses in Macedonia, some 2,000 of them sent to a new town in Thrace to settle the area. He named the town Poneripolis, Rogue Town, or Crooksville. They had a bit of a sense of humor. Philip seems to have been the first Western ruler to recognize the need to tie the nation's economic and military infrastructure together with a series of national roads. Surely he was the first ruler in Greece to do so. Using corvée and serf labor, Philip constructed a number of all-weather roads to stitch the nation together. The army also worked on the construction projects, providing the critical building skills and engineering required. Philip originally emphasized constructing military roads leading from the interior up through the mountains and into towns and forts that were key defenses of the mountain passes, through which past invaders had so often travelled. Some of these roads led beyond Macedonia's own frontiers, no doubt as signals to the far tribes of Macedonia's intentions to invade their homelands if attacked. Major roads ran from Macedonia's ports to the capital, while others connected to the mines and forests, to important urban centres as well as the ports. Some of these roads were 10 meters wide, so really building up. Philip also improved the country's agricultural base by draining swamps and building dikes to control the annual flooding of the lower plain, increasing the arable land available to farmers. In the highland, he converted some of the pasture land to agricultural land, drawing the population out of the hills and sending Macedonian farmers to teach the pastoralists how to farm. I feel like at times that the author is kind of repeating a lot of what he says. I understand that he's trying to tackle a large host of different areas, but there's definitely a bit of repetition going on. He built towns and forts for them to live in, and he sent officers to train and equip them as militia, so they could act as an early warning system against any surprise attack by tribal invaders. He enlarged the city of Crenides, Gold Town and renamed it Philippi. He created new fiefs in Spear One lands, and as he did later in Olympus, he razed the city and distributed its territories to the Macedonians to settle there. So Olympus is this area here. And these kind of cities on this area became a major pain for him, this league. Macedonian towns had been fortified since time immemorial. Philip embarked on a program to improve the old walls and forts, especially those nearest the coast and along the Thracian border, an area historically subject to attacks by Paeonians and Thracians. All new towns were also fortified. Philip's effort to create an integrated national infrastructure was intended to accomplish more than military efficiency and economic integration. Philip was attempting to create a truly coherent national state, in which all his subjects thought of themselves as one Macedonian people, instead of being divided into scores of racial, ethnic, and tribal groups, whose loyalty and effort extended no further than the group's self-defined identities. Moreover, as the Macedonian state extended its control to areas beyond its traditional geographic boundaries, Philip knew that Macedonia did not possess the resources to sustain the large army of occupation that would be required to maintain a harsh imperial rule. Instead, Philip ruled with a lighter hand than, say, the Persians would have in order to foster a realm in which coexistence, cooperation, and diversity were emphasized rather than domination. Philip's model of governance was somewhat similar to that later employed by Rome, but it was Philip who first attempted it in the West. Creating a nation in which diverse peoples come to think of themselves as one people required far more than a coherent economic and administrative infrastructure. To convince different peoples that they were equals, it was in many ways a more psychological task than a physical one. Philip was building a nation of loyal subjects, not captives held against their will. To this end, all of Philip's subjects were free, even those taken in war and resettled in new cities. Excuse me, my throat's starting to get at me a little bit. Okay. Where were we? The captives and former slaves were transformed into yeomen who were free to work the land, fish the waters, herd cattle or sheep, or work in the forests and mines. Whenever Philip built a new city for resettlement, he made sure it had land to farm and mines to provide work. As previously mentioned, unlike the Greek city-states, Philip's Macedonia did not rely on a substructure of slave labor. The new transplants were incorporated as free persons in the cities and villages. Excuse me. For many of those who were captured in that war or who watched their own lands absorbed by the expanding Macedonian state, their lives were often better and freer in a country that afforded them more food and economic opportunity. One aspect of this increased economic opportunity was the ability of newcomers and transplants to serve in the Macedonian army. Each town and city raised its own militia for its defense and for maintaining law and order. These militia units were trained in Macedonian equipment and tactics, provided the strategic manpower reserved for the king's field army, and could be called the colours if needed. Those militia soldiers who proved themselves attuned to military life were given the opportunity to join the king's field army and make a profession of military service. Philip may even have introduced a state system of education, at least for Macedonia proper and the upper cantons, that centered on infantry training for the young men in the cities and towns, who might then qualify as members of the king's field army. It may have involved the creation of local page schools, from which the best soldiers could then go on and serve as infantry, just as the graduates of the Royal Page School went into the cavalry. Military service, as in modern times in nations such as Israel and Turkey, a little bit topical, becomes a means of national identification for the various peoples within the country. Some of the peoples incorporated into the Macedonian state had specialized ways of fighting. The Thracian peltasts, light javelin infantry, Thessalian cavalry, Scythian horse archers, and Paeonian javelineers all provided specialized combat units for the king's field army. Then, as now, military service was an important avenue for diverse groups to raise their status in society and to demonstrate their loyalty to the nation state. Philip used this dynamic to great advantage in acculturating many different peoples into an amalgam with a shared national identity. Philip used the Greek language as another mechanism of national integration. The official language of the Macedonian state and its extended possessions in Greek was Greek, so many of the native peoples and tribes came under the Hellenic influence of Greek as the primary language of commerce and politics. One supposes that the specialized military units also had to learn Greek, and that all military commands were given in Greek. For some of the more remote Balkan mountain peoples, Philip's adoption of Greek as the main state's official language provided the first extended opportunity for exposing them to Greek values and culture. In this limited way, Philip deliberately fostered Hellenism in the hopes that it would lead to increased social integration. The oligarchies, aristocracies, chat, what am I missing? I don't know if you can hear me, Clever, but we're getting a lot of information. Some of it's kind of being repeated, but a lot of information about how Philip organized his state to best serve the interests. The oligarchies, aristocracies, tribal chiefs and kings who ruled the tribes and lands that were now incorporated into Macedonia also had to be integrated. Philip recognized this problem from the beginning. Whenever he was forced to fight them, he made it a practice to kill as many of the leaders and aristocrats in battle as possible, just as Genghis Khan did. Even with the battle won, he frequently ordered his cavalry to pursue and kill the enemy leadership. Philip understood that the more who fell on the battlefield, the fewer would be left to accommodate and gain the loyalty to the new order. Once the battle was over, Philip often took any surviving defeated chiefs and important nobles of conquered peoples into his court as companions. This position awarded them an even greater status than they had previously possessed, and afforded them an opportunity to demonstrate their loyalty to their king. It also allowed Philip to keep a close eye on them. Powerful Macedonian noblemen who were also made companions or given other respected positions at courts for the same reasons. Philip aimed at reorientating their concerns and loyalties away from their regions, towns, or tribes, and towards the nation-state. Philip's creation of the first competent corps of Macedonian infantry was not only an achievement of military genius, but also an experiment in social engineering. Philip raised the infantry's status by calling them Pezheteroi, Pezheteroi, or foot companions. The infantry was by far the largest of the combat arms, and men were drawn from the national standard from all walks of life, making it a truly national and democratic institution. As long as the infantry loved Philip, there was little even the most disgruntled group of noblemen might consider in attempting to resist the will of the king. Thus it was Philip transformed the power of the traditional Macedonian monarchy by changing the nature of social relations of the old Macedonian society, and by reorienting them away from tribal and local concerns and towards new national aspirations. Proof of Philip's success at achieving a high level of national integration and identity in Macedonia can be inferred from the fact that although Philip's infantry and cavalry units were raised on a regional or territorial basis, they regarded themselves as national forces, composing the king's field army. That Philip was able to instill a sense of national identity in such a diverse group of peoples in so short of time, or indeed to accomplish it at all, is a testimony to his genius. Excuse me. Let me see, how many more pages do I have? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so there's 6. Well, really, there's 5. There's only like 2 lines on the 6th page. But I'm going to go fill up my water bottle, and then I'm going to drink from it, and then I'm going to finish off this chapter. And we'll be 2 chapters in. Let me just... I'm mad at myself. I forgot to put a number on what the title of this stream was. What is it? It's number 4, I think. No, it's number 5, actually. Number 5. I'll update that. Okay. So I'm gonna go for a moment or two. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. There we go. Well, I shouldn't have done that. I apologize. Okay. My voice feels a little bit better, but I think I will definitely end at the end of this chapter. Philip's strategy. Philip was surely a great general. Seen in the larger context, however, it was clear that Philip was equally a great strategist. The ability to conduct wars and win battles falls in the realm of the operational and tactical arts. Deciding whether to fight, when and where to fight, and in what political context and for what national goals to fight, is a concern of the strategist, and oft not to be confused with those of the tactician. Strategy involving setting national goals and employing the appropriate means or combination thereof at any given time to achieve them. In this context, waging war is but one means among many available to achieve a nation's goals. Warfare is one instrument of national policy, to be conceived and pursued only as a means to larger ends. This belief is the essence of Karl von Clausewitz's famous dictum that, quote, war is continuation of policy by other means. The strategist of Philip's day might have implemented other means in the service of national goals: diplomacy, economic influence and pressure, intelligence gathering, bribery, fifth columns to undermine an adversary's political support within his own state, propaganda, assassination, and the threat or overt use of force. Whatever means were employed, however, they had to be used within the existing political context, for in the end, strategy is about achieving national objectives as defined by political authorities. Such objectives are, therefore, ultimately political goals, and have meaning within some identifiable political context. Philip was a supreme strategist in that he understood the place of war in policy, and he knew its limits. Even to a Homeric and Greek warrior such as Philip, the search for individual glory and heroism had no place in his strategic thinking. This position is in contrast to that of his son Alexander, who, quote, seems to have been possessed of some sort of restless, almost irrational desire for glory, unchecked by a larger political sense. That is, by strategic calculation or vision. And that was by note 55. Let me see who said that. That was Cockwell, Philip of Macedon. I have no idea who that is. But I think that's quite fair to say, but at the same time, Alexander kind of went ham. Philip's emphasis on strategy is evident in his practice of using military force as little as possible when dealing with the Greek states. Instead, he preferred to obtain his ends through diplomacy, threat, bribery, or other means necessary. Diodorus tells us in that regard that he, or Philip, is known to fame as one who, with but the most slenderest resources to support his claim to the throne, won for himself the greatest empire in the Greek world, while the growth of his position was not due to so much to his prowess in arms, but as to his adroitness and cordiality in diplomacy. I didn't know they had French in Greek. Obviously, this is a translation. Philip himself is said to have been prouder of his grasp of strategy and his diplomatic successes than of valor in actual combat. This willingness to use force sparingly is one of Philip's most unusual traits as a strategist, especially since he possessed the largest and most effective army in Greece. The open debates, factionalism, and crippled executive characteristics of the politics of the Greek states gave Philip an important advantage when formulating and executing national defense strategy. Philip had the benefit of combining all government decisions in his person so that, as Demosthenes remarked, he was master of all things public and secret, general, ruler, and treasurer, all in one. Philip also surrounded himself with excellent advisors, and his senior generals were first-rate combat commanders. After Philip, Antipater and Parmenio were probably the two most competent and battle-experienced field commanders in all of Greece. They were also intelligent men in their own rights. Antipater wrote a history of Philip's Illyrian wars, and Aristotle chose him to be the executor of his will. Parmenio's advice to Alexander to accept the Persian king Darius's offer of half the Persian Empire still stands as sound strategic advice. This quality of leadership was important. The citizen armies of the Greek states had no professional generals, staffs, or non-commissioned officers, whereas the Macedonian army had a corps of experienced combat unit leaders at all levels of command that paid large dividends on the battlefield. Though the Peloponnesian Wars had begun to change the Greek military capabilities, the inability of most Greek armies to project and sustain force over prolonged periods and distances meant they were incapable of strategic application. The amateurism of Greek combat armies were compounded by the fact that few politicians or generals in these armies ever thought about strategy. When confronting a first-rate strategic thinker like Philip, the leaders of the Greek states were thoroughly outclassed. Philip possessed numerous abilities that made his execution of grand strategy successful. He had unusual patience. He understood that not all the objectives of his strategy could be pursued at once, and was always willing to defer to changed circumstances, providing he could come away with at least some advantage. Philip could have forced the pass at Thermopylae almost any time after 352 BC, but he waited more than 6 years while he attended to other things. Philip never let temporary reverses dissuade him from continuing to pursue his objectives. Defeated in Thessaly in 353 BC, he withdrew only to attack with more fervor the following year. Philip always kept his eye on the objective and did not permit operational success or failure to distract him from it or to force changes in the larger strategic equation. He could easily have reduced Chalcidice years before he did. But even in the face of provocation, he waited until he had attended to the more pressing threats from Illyria and Athens. Philip was able to set clear priorities in his strategic plan. He always focused on what was most important at any given time, and never allowed minor reverses or political irritants to change his mind. Oh, hello, copyright. You're still breathing. That's good. I am. Two of Philip's most useful qualities in executing strategic plans were his manifest preference for political solutions to military ones, and his flexibility. which was demonstrated in his willingness to change course politically or militarily when events required. Philip rarely found himself pursuing pointless adventures or trapped into a course of action whose cost exceeded the worth of its goals. When he laid siege to Perinthus and Byzantium in 340 BC, for example, Philip expected quick success. When the sieges dragged on longer than he thought reasonable and events in Scythia promised greater gains, he broke off the sieges and marched north to attend to other matters. Similarly, he could have reduced Athens to ashes after his victory at Chaeronea, but Athens was too important to Philip's long-range plans. He reached a political accommodation with his most troublesome adversary, and did not destroy the city or even punish those Athenian politicians who had vilified him for years. Revenge may be sweet, but in Philip's mind, there were times when other things were more important. Philip's grand strategy had two aims: to unify the Macedonian state by integrating it socially, politically, and economically into a viable and effective national unity, and to make it safe by reducing the military capability of Macedonia's neighbouring states to invade the country. Philip also sought to expand Macedonia's control and influence over Thrace and the Balkans for both economic and political reasons, and in the process create a power complex so strong so as to enable him to influence events in Greece proper. Macedonia needed little in the way of resources from Greece. It sought political instead of military hegemony in order to prevent any Greek state or alliance of states from being able to threaten Macedonia's territorial integrity and national security interests. So, to give a brief overview of what he's saying, basically what he's arguing is Macedonia looks to establish control over its primary northern, western, eastern issues, which allows them to combat then the southern city-states where the most pressure is being applied in terms of men and political issues. You can only just look at the amount of cities and kind of capabilities that these cities would be able to apply on Macedonia should a full league essentially form of this region. By controlling such a large area, he is able to put so much pressure onto them that once he takes Thessaly, it's almost just a bygone conclusion at that point. The amount of resources and men he's able to throw at them at that point. Philip's grand strategy required policies as means to his objectives in each zone of strategic interest. In the zone north of the boundary between Thessaly and Macedonia, Philip pursued a course of strong military action intended to intimidate, conquer, destroy, or annex Macedonia's immediate numbers, including some of the Greek cities and colonies that had been established on Macedonian territory. His treatment of the populations of these zones was often rough and involved razing cities and selling their inhabitants into slavery. The goal of Philip's policies were to create the Macedonian state and secure it from attack, and he was prepared to use harsh measures to accomplish it. Let me just take a drink of water. Last page. In dealing with the states in Greece proper, Philip employed policies that were very different. Here he treated his populations more leniently, and did not annex territory. In Greece he resorted to force in far fewer instances, and for the most part inflicted far less damage than he did in the north. This strategy was, of course, deliberate. Philip had no intention of occupying Greece. Instead, he wished to preserve the Greek states as political military entities, and keep them as a buffer against Persian ambitions, both in Thrace and ultimately in Macedonia itself. Although by no means certain, it is also possible that from an early date Philip thought about a campaign against Persia. If so, then he would have wanted to reserve for later use the military resources of the Greek states, particularly the Athenian navy, which could protect against the Persian counterattack once Philip's armies had landed in Ionia. Philip spared Thebes, Sparta, and Athens when he could have destroyed them. He even intervened on behalf of Phocas to prevent its wholesale destruction by Theban hands at the end of the Fourth Sacred War. And a lot of what he talks about there, of using the Greek states as kind of a buffer, this is something that becomes a big thing in the successor wars. They're often trying to curry the favor of the Greek states, city-states, promising them freedom. Antipater or the Antiparids, the the Ptolemies. They all say that they're there to free the Romans from the yoke of some illegitimate king. It's very funny. To achieve the objectives of his grand strategic design, Philip needed an instrument of military force that was far different from the armies of the Greek states. Just as the Greek states' pursuit of limited political goals shaped the structure and capabilities of their hoplite armies, so too did Philip's strategic goals require different military structure with greater operational capabilities to achieve them. An analysis of the Macedonian army is a subject of Chapter 3. That's going to be interesting. Here it is sufficient to note that Philip's army was very different from the armies of the Greek states. His army was a standing one, not a part-time army, comprised of professional soldiers, not citizen militia, highly trained in maneuver and not, as the hoplite phalanx was, virtually immobile, and made up of multiple combat arms instead of the single arm of infantry. Philip's army was also able to sustain itself for long periods in the field through a capable logistics train, while hoplite armies could sustain themselves only for short periods, to conduct strategic forced marches against armies with no comparable capability. Oh, sorry, that was what he wanted to do with his army. To draw on large reserves of manpower, to employ the first professional siege train in the Greek army, and to confront its adversaries with new weapons, formations, and tactics, all employed in an integrated manner of battle. Philip seemed to have been the first general in the West to have had the opportunity to design his own military force, and to have done so with clear strategic capabilities and objectives in mind. The objectives he wanted to obtain defined the required operational capabilities of the force structure needed to achieve them. The result was that Philip's army was the only army in Greece that, by itself, was capable of destroying not only the army of any Greek state, but also the state as well. Philip employed this new instrument of force in a manner that F. E. Adcock calls, quote, the strategy of overthrow. We'll need to look him up. The culture of Greek warfare evolved armies capable of achieving only limited objectives that rarely involved the destruction or even long-term occupation of a city or state. Battles might be won or lost, but the states that fought them were relatively immune from wholesale destruction. The Macedonian army under Philip added a new dimension to Greek warfare, with its strategic capability to destroy entire Greek peoples, societies, and states. Philip first demonstrated this ability in his early campaigns against Macedonia's neighbouring enemies. Any conflict between the Greek states and Philip now risked the possibility of the former's complete destruction, resulting in a fear that provided Philip with a considerable advantage in his diplomatic dealings with them. It is testimony to Philip's strategic genius that he won his most important victories in Greece through diplomacy, with his having to resort to force only rarely. One reason for his successful diplomatic overtures was that the threat of overwhelming force was always present in the minds of Philip's adversaries. And that leads us quite nicely into the next chapter, the Macedonian war machine. Class done. Nice, clever. And or reading, or I suppose maybe our lecture today is done. Quite a nice amount done, I think. And no sooner too, my throat was definitely starting to get to me. That was very good. Thank you very much, Angale. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and thank you for sticking around. I'm glad you managed to make it before I started reading. Excuse me. I will go, if you would like to hear the rest of the readings beforehand, because this is the fourth one. I'm going to be spending a little bit of time. Got to the Macedonian army today. It was just a brief discussion of what the Macedonian army was doing. Or kind of the use of the Macedonian army and how Philip got to design it from the ground up to achieve certain objectives. The next chapter is going to be dealing specifically with the army proper, which I think will be very interesting. We'll probably be looking a lot at it, logistics and such. Your voice is very soothing, so I felt very relaxed. That is wonderful to hear, Angale. I hope. Am I pronouncing your name correctly, Angale? I hope I am. I myself am regularly mispronounced, so I always try and make sure that I do pronounce things correct. But Anne Gale. Not gonna lie, I'm still stuck on a jury box full of spears. I like to imagine that they walk into the jury room and they don't bring their own spears. I think that's how you pronounce it. You don't even know. I'll stick with Anne Gale. I like that. Maybe on Gale, because then it's like the Gale in Irish. Oh no, wait, hang on. Gale would be Gael. The court. I like to imagine that they're like by the jury, like box, either in like a like an umbrella stand type thing, like an umbrella bin. Gale, yeah, so they can like just take them as they go in, and maybe like the speaker of the jury gets like a special one, like a gold one or something, or else maybe they're like on the wall, and as each person walks by, they take theirs. Personally, I think this would be a fine addition to any legal system. Do they announce when to stab the person? I think, excuse me, I think they do. It's essentially they'll be reading. No, I like to think that it's like they sentence them to death. The judge approves it, like he bangs his gavel, and then it's just a mad dash to stab him. Which will probably lead to multiple people getting stabbed, because you're going to have 12 untrained individuals all trying to stab one guy. It would be fine if it was 3, but like once you get to like 4 or 5 people all trying to attack one person, they will overwhelm them quite easily. But what's often going to happen is like is people will just get in their way, in each other's way. It could be a countdown, but I think if you're going to do a countdown, you should also give them like a javelin or two. Throwing spears. I was thinking that actually. I was just about to say maybe it should be throwing spears, javelins and such, that they can just launch at them. Is the one person like shackled or stuck in place? I don't know. Do we give them a fighting chance, or do we just lock them in place? I feel like locking them in place is a little mean. I'd say give them a fighting chance. Like okay, how about this? Once the sentence handed down, they are locked in place for the majority of it. Depends on the degree of the crime. Well, as I said, Deed, I feel like we're not gonna kill someone over like they stole a Freddo. They stole a 20-cent Freddo, which used to be 10 cent, but now inflation. So it's more like 50 cent for a Freddo. The fighting chance would be hilarious. The gavel slams and suddenly the guy is like, he flips over the table and gets behind it, rips off, like maybe he picks up his chair to use as a shield or something. You can duck, dodge, dip and dive, the 5 Ds of javelin dodging. I don't know. Wait, what is it? Is dodge, dip, dive, duck and dodge. That's the quote from Dodgeball. Would accidentally stab each other and the other guy could potentially escape. Yeah. He'd almost be like if he could get in people's, but like first manslaughter versus first degree murder. Yeah, maybe for like really heinous people, like really heinous things, like not even first degree murder where it's like okay, yeah, because it might just be like, you know, family, I don't know, some family thing gone horribly wrong. But like, you know, if you had like a serial killer, now you don't give them any chance. You just lock them up, and people just like go 1, 2, 3, and they all try and get 50 points. I don't know. Oh wow, it's almost bang on 12, and we're almost bang on an hour and a half. Yes, just like that clever. But like rather than a ball of water, it's a spear. But I'd rather not get a spear to the face personally. That would be poor for my health. Maybe they can all like have their names attached on like a little string with like a name tag, and whoever gets like the best shot, um, can get like a prize. The judge will hand it out to them. the post the post javelin throwing award has a little tag points, and yeah, exactly. Like hard to hit areas are like kind of like special. Like obviously the head, um, but then like maybe like bang on the heart, and then like under the arms or something. Uh, like the belly button. Uh, I'm not gonna say another part, but that could also happen. I feel like that would just be mean. I feel like once that happens, they just get killed. Um, I want to stab to the head. Ain't on Gale is a dangerous individual. uh, that'd probably be what I'd aimed for too, and widely miss and hit the bailiff. That'd be another thing. All the people behind the guy. I know we could rearrange the court, but no. If you want to come to court, if you want to watch like the fun, you're but a helpless bunny. We'll give you a spear, and you're very dangerous. Now you want to stab everything. To be fair, if I had a spear, I'd want to stab everything too. But like rather than rearranging, if you want to come to the courts and like watch, the lawyers and stuff get like the back seats. But if you want to come and watch the fun, you have to be like sorta in danger. It's like the splash zone. It's a splash zone, but it could be a javelin to the face. What? And with that, with the possibility of an innocent bystander getting insta-gibbed, insta-killed in our court of law, I think I will leave it there for today. I'm gonna look for someone to raid. Who's a good person to raid? Who's on right now that we can raid into? I suppose what I will spear is only 130 Australian sollars. What's the conversion rate on Australian sollars to dollars? But that's pretty cheap. You should get like a cool fancy one, D. I suppose I have been doing kind of ASMR style dollary doos. They're handed out by the kangaroos. And then practice throwing it. Is there anyone specifically doing ASMR? We could raid into... Ooh, okay. I know who I'm going to send you guys to. I'm going to send you guys to a very cool artist by the name of Sheen. His Twitch is Blue Whistle, but we're going to raid Sheen. Now you guys will see he's actually the robot. There's a mouse thing that's drawing, but that's not Sheen. Sheen is the one with the billy club behind him. Ooh, he has some like smooth jazz playing. Okay, this is perfect. Because I often worry about streaming into other people. Oh, that's a bit more than smooth jazz. That's like a dubstep version. Not like a dubstep, but like a remixed version. Okay, well, you know, it'll work. I'm sure it'll work. But I'm gonna send you guys off. Thank you all for joining. If you haven't already, I would really appreciate a follow if you'd like to continue. It's not electronic. It's more like it's just like a remixed version. You'll see what I mean in a moment or two. But as I said, if you haven't already, I'd love if you would follow. It's very much a nice supportive gesture. And if not, you can check, or if you already do, you can check me out on Twitter as well. So I will send you guys off to Mr. Cheen. So I'd like to thank you all again for joining me, and I'll see you guys soon. Garev Mina Mahagat and Slán Gafoil. I've got the end stream. All of you guys heard me cough.